The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. True, nervous, very dreadfully nervous I had been, and am. But why will you say I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell on me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. This is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. He would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, about midnight, I had looked in upon him while he slept. This I did for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight, but I found his eye always closed. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers. To think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he had not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. For he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was black as pitch. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed. "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. I knew that he'd been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very little crevice in the lantern. The single dim ray shot out from the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. Now I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound. I knew that sound well too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. The heart beat on with a muffled sound. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. I took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber, and deposited all between the scantlings. Then I replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. There entered men who introduced themselves as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bid them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, I brought chairs into the room, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. My manner had convinced them I was singularly at ease. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still I sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible that they heard not? Almighty God, no, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror, but anything was better than this agony. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt I must scream or die. And now, again, hark! Louder, louder, louder!
Pennisi! I can stand your mockery a moment longer. You are the villains for your deceit. I can't stand